The containment bay shook, and I dropped to the floor before I even understood why. Metal groaned above me, the lights flickered from white to red, and the emergency siren tore through the corridor like a living thing. I pressed my back against the wall and watched the reinforced door at the far end of the bay bend inward, just slightly, like something enormous had leaned against it to test its strength. I am Vren, third officer, aboard the Coalition science vessel Halvin's Reach. I have served on this ship for 11 cycles. I have seen storms that could crack a hull open like an egg. I have seen void creatures with teeth longer than my arm. None of that prepared me for what we had locked inside Containment Bay 4. Our scouting team found it 3 days earlier, on a frontier world our charts labeled only as Sector 9. The creature stood taller than 3 of our soldiers stacked one on top of the other. Its hide was thick and gray, ridged like old bark, and its claws had torn through a reinforced transport crate, as if the metal were paper. 6 of our people did not return from that expedition. The 7th came back with a broken arm, and eyes that would not stop shaking. We sedated the beast with enough compound to put down a small starship engine. We hauled it aboard in a magnetic cage, built to hold collapsing stars. And now, less than an hour into our journey home, it was waking up. "Report," barked Commander Ashwood Voss over the comm. Static cut through his words. "Vren, what is happening down there?" I forced myself to speak steadily, though my hands would not stop trembling. "The sedative is failing, Commander, much faster than the science team predicted. The creature is conscious. It is testing the containment field. Can it break through?" I looked at the door again. Another dent appeared, deeper this time. A low sound rolled through the bay. Not quite a growl, not quite a roar, but something older and heavier than both. "I do not know," I said, "but I do not want to find out." Voss ordered every armed unit to the bay. Within minutes, a dozen soldiers filled the corridor outside, weapons raised, faces pale beneath their helmets. I had fought alongside these soldiers before. I had watched them stand calm against void raiders and hostile fleets. Not one of them looked calm now. "Prepare to vent the bay," Voss said through the comm. "If it breaks the field, we lose it into space before it reaches the crew decks." It was a brutal plan, but a necessary one. I nodded to myself, gripping the wall, waiting for the order that would end this before it truly began. That is when I heard footsteps behind me. Light, unhurried, almost careless footsteps, coming from the direction of the human quarters. I turned, expecting a soldier, or perhaps a science officer, come to observe. Instead, I saw Claire Bennett, one of the 3 human liaisons stationed aboard our ship, walking down the corridor with a warm drink in her hand and an expression of mild curiosity on her face. "Officer Vren," she said, stopping beside me. "What's all the noise about?" I stared at her. Somewhere behind that door, an apex predator, capable of tearing through starship plating, was fighting to break free, and this small, unarmed human was asking about noise as though a maintenance drone had simply tipped over. "You need to return to your quarters," I said, "immediately. This is not safe." She glanced past me at the shaking door, then at the row of soldiers with weapons raised, then back at me. Her expression did not change. If anything, she looked amused. "Is that the creature you brought aboard from Sector 9? She asked. "Yes, it is extremely dangerous. 6 of our people did not survive first contact with it." Claire tilted her head, studying the door the way a person studies a puzzle they already suspect they can solve. "Can I see it?" I nearly dropped my own weapon in disbelief. "Absolutely not. It could kill you in an instant." "I don't think it will," she said simply, and started walking toward the door. Commander Voss's voice cracked through the comm again. "Vren, human liaison Bennett is not authorized in that corridor. Get her out of there." I reached for her arm, but she had already stepped past the line of soldiers, past their raised weapons, past every warning sign flashing red along the walls. She approached the containment door and placed her palm flat against the cold metal. The pounding from the other side stopped. Every soldier in that corridor froze. I froze. Even the sirens seemed to fall quieter, though I knew that was only my mind playing tricks. "Bennett," Voss said, his voice tight with restrained fury, "step away from that door right now." "Give me a minute, Commander," she said, not turning around. I think I know what's wrong. Wrong? I repeated. Claire, there is nothing wrong. There is a monster on the other side of that door that nearly ended an entire expedition. She looked at me over her shoulder, and for the first time, I saw something other than calm in her expression. It looked almost like sympathy. He's not a monster, she said. He's scared. I did not have a response to that. None of us did. She asked one of the science officers, a nervous young man named Elias Cho, for the full report on the creature. He handed her a data pad with trembling fingers. Claire scrolled through it quickly, her eyes narrowing at certain lines, softening at others. You sedated an adult male during mating season, she said, half to herself. In an unfamiliar environment, separated from any pack, after your team already killed 2 of his territory rivals for tissue samples. She looked up at Elias. Is that right? Elias swallowed hard. The expedition report says we removed 2 competing males from the area before capture, yes. Claire exhaled slowly, and something in her posture shifted, not fear, but frustration, like a teacher realizing her students had skipped every important lesson. No wonder he's out of his mind, she muttered. Voss arrived a moment later, flanked by 2 more soldiers, his face dark with anger. Liaison Bennett, this is not your operation. Step back immediately, or I will have you removed by force. Claire did not step back. She turned to face him fully, and though she was easily half his height, she did not look small in that moment. Commander, if you vent this bay, you are going to kill a living creature who did nothing wrong except defend the only territory he had left. And you are going to do it out of fear, not necessity. It killed 6 of my people. Your people invaded his home, took 2 of his rivals, and then dragged him across the stars in a box, Claire said. I'd fight too. The corridor went silent, except for the low hum of the ship's engines. I watched Voss's jaw tighten, watched the muscles in his neck strain against words he clearly wanted to shout. But something in Claire's tone held him back. It was not defiance for its own sake. It was certainty. You have 5 minutes, Voss finally said. If that door opens and something happens to you, that is on your own decision, not mine. Understood, Claire said, and turned back to the door. I stepped closer to her, unable to stop myself. Claire, please reconsider. You do not understand what is inside there. She smiled at me, the same easy smile she wore every single day in the mess hall, as if we were discussing the weather instead of a creature capable of ending her life in a single motion. I grew up around animals a lot bigger, and a lot more stubborn than most people expect, she said. Trust me on this one, Vren. I did not understand what that meant, not yet. She pressed a sequence into the door's side panel, one that would ease the containment field rather than fully release it, creating a narrow gap just wide enough for sound and scent to pass through, but not wide enough for the creature to escape. Soldiers tensed on either side, weapons trained on the widening seam of the door. From within, the low growl returned, rising into something sharper. Hey, Claire said gently, leaning close to the gap. Hey, big guy. It's all right. Nobody here is going to hurt you anymore. The growl faltered. I held my breath. Every soldier in that corridor held their breath. Even Voss, arms crossed and jaw locked, went utterly still. I know you're scared, Claire continued, her voice soft, almost musical, nothing like the sharp tones we usually associated with human authority. I know this place smells wrong and sounds wrong, and everyone in it is terrified of you. But I'm not going to hurt you, and I'm not going to let anyone else hurt you either. A long pause followed. Then, faint but unmistakable, came a sound none of us expected. Not a growl. Not a roar. A low, rumbling exhale, almost like a sigh. Claire smiled wider. There we go. She reached toward the panel again, and before Voss could stop her, she widened the gap enough to step halfway into the room herself. Bennett! Voss shouted, lunging forward, but 2 of his own soldiers hesitated, unsure whether pulling their commander's authority against a human liaison was worth the risk of startling whatever waited on the other side. I could see through the gap now, just barely. The creature crouched in the center of the bay, massive shoulders hunched, claws pressed into the floor, eyes glowing faintly amber in the low light. It was even larger up close than our report suggested, its breathing heavy, ragged, exhausted from fighting sedation and fear in equal measure. And it was watching Claire the way a wounded animal watches the first hand it has seen that is not holding a weapon. "Easy," she whispered, crouching low, making herself smaller, less threatening. "I'm not one of them. I'm not here to study you or cage you. I just want to help." The creature's massive head lowered slightly. A single claw scraped against the floor, but slower this time, more curious than aggressive. I do not know how long we stood there. It felt like hours, though the ship's clock would later tell me it was only minutes. Claire stayed crouched at the threshold, speaking in that same gentle voice, never raising her volume, never making a sudden move. Eventually, the creature took one slow step forward. Every soldier in the corridor raised their weapon in unison. "Hold your fire," Claire said sharply, not even looking back at them. "If a single shot goes off right now, we will lose him completely, and probably lose some of you along with him." Voss opened his mouth to argue, but something in her tone silenced him again. The creature took another step, then lowered its massive head until it was level with Claire's outstretched hand. For a moment, nothing happened. The whole corridor seemed to hold its breath as one. Then the creature pressed its snout gently into her palm. I heard someone behind me exhale in disbelief. I think it might have been myself. Claire laughed softly, the sound warm and unguarded, and scratched gently along the ridge of the creature's jaw. "See? Not so scary after all, are you?" The soldiers lowered their weapons slowly, though their eyes remained wide with disbelief. Voss stood frozen at the edge of the corridor, staring at the scene as though his mind refused to process it. Over the following hour, Claire worked with the science team to properly stabilize the creature's environment. She adjusted the lighting to something dimmer and warmer, requested a change in the air composition to more closely match its homeworld, and asked that the containment field be replaced with a simple boundary marker instead of a punishing energy barrier. "He's not trying to escape to hurt anyone," she explained to a still-stunned Elias Cho. "He's trying to escape because everything about this place feels like a threat. Give him space, give him quiet, and stop treating him like a weapon waiting to go off." By the time the ship reached the edge of our home system, the creature, whom Claire had taken to calling Beryl for reasons she refused to fully explain, sat calmly in a modified section of the science bay, chewing contentedly on a large ration block, while Claire sat nearby reading from a datapad, one hand resting absently against his massive side. I stood at the doorway, watching in quiet disbelief, when Commander Voss approached and stood beside me. "I still do not understand how she did that," he admitted, his voice quieter now, stripped of its earlier fury. "That creature killed 6 of my soldiers." "I do not think it was ever about violence for her," I said slowly, working through the thought as I spoke it. "I think, to her, it was simply a frightened animal in an environment stacked entirely against it." Voss shook his head, still watching the pair through the viewport. "Do all humans handle danger this way?" I did not have an answer for that, not then. Later that evening, I found Claire alone near the observation deck, watching the stars pass by in silence. I approached carefully, still unsure how to speak to someone who had walked calmly toward what the rest of us considered certain death. "May I ask you something?" I said. She glanced up and smiled. "Of course." "Were you ever afraid? When you approached the door, when you stepped into that bay, were you frightened even slightly?" Claire considered the question for a long moment, tapping her fingers lightly against the railing. "A little," she admitted. "But fear isn't really the problem in situations like that. Panic is. Fear tells you to be careful. Panic tells you to make a mistake. And you never panicked." "I've handled animals my whole life," she said. "Bigger ones than people expect. Angrier ones too, honestly. You learn pretty quickly that most creatures aren't looking for a fight, they're looking for safety. If you can convince them you're not a threat, most of the danger disappears on its own." I thought about her words for a long time after that conversation. I thought about the soldiers who had stood ready to end a creature's life out of pure terror, and about the woman who had walked calmly into the same room with nothing but a soft voice and an open hand. Weeks later, after Beryl had been safely transferred to a properly designed habitat preserve rather than a research cell, I overheard 2 crew members discussing the incident in the mess hall. I heard she just walked right up to it, one of them said, shaking his head. Like it was nothing more than an oversized pet. I smiled slightly at that, though neither of them noticed me nearby. I have served among many species across many worlds. I have seen soldiers who did not flinch at incoming fire, and diplomats who negotiated calmly under the threat of total war. But I had never, in all my years of service, witnessed anything quite like a single human woman walking straight towards something an entire crew feared, offering nothing but calm words and steady hands, and somehow, impossibly, winning. If that was simply how humans treated a creature they considered dangerous, I found myself wondering, quietly and with no small amount of unease, what exactly they considered truly formidable. I still do not know the answer, but I suspect, deep down, that I never truly want to find out.